This week's surveillance report covers OpenAI's rogue AI agent hacking far more than just Hugging Face, and actually a similar thing now happening to Anthropic. Ron-linked hackers burrowing into dozens of US water systems, an activist prosecuted for wiping his number at the border, and thousands of private Claude chats exposed on Google. Bit of an AI-heavy week this week, plus our normal data breaches, threats, FOSS Plus updates, open source. Welcome to the Techlore Surveillance Report, everybody, your essential weekly tech news delivering the deep analysis on the latest threats to security, privacy, and digital freedom, and of course, empowering you to reclaim control and defend your rights as we go along. I'm excited this week, no announcements really, so let's just dive into the fun stories. Following this one has been a bit of a nightmare actually, because the story and my analysis on it continues to change over time. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, pretty much set up what was supposed to be sandboxed environment, which was not properly sandboxed and made it easy to escape. And then that model essentially started attacking different things around the internet. The main highlight being Hugging Face, which is another AI organization. The original story is that, oh my God, this rogue AI agent from OpenAI escaped its boundaries from a testing environment and just started hacking the world, and it just kind of like snapped its fingers and made it happen. But as we learn more details, it looks less that way. And when we see these attacks, it's important to remind, especially the new listeners out there, a lot of people think that it's like the movies where, you just put in a command into your terminal and boom, you hacked someone and that's done. I think a lot of people know it's not that simple, but for attacks like these, I think what people don't appreciate, like when I'm talking to people around me, is the amount of steps required to get to that final destination. Like let's say even if that one terminal line hack thing actually worked that way, you would have to do that multiple times to finally get where you want to go. And then, of course, we all pretty much know it's not just a one command kind of thing. And so it's the kind of thing of scouring the internet for publicly available credentials for certain user accounts that have access to certain information. They then found some specific 0 days. They found specific bugs, and all these things piled on top of each other to finally give them access. And we've seen attacks like this from humans too. I think really what's new here is the fact, well, it wasn't done by a human, one, but also it was just faster. It was more offensive. It might work a little bit faster than a human might. Ars Technica had this great article where they came forward making a pretty compelling argument that this isn't the triumph it was made out to be. When these headlines came out, these AI companies, I think what's really hard to figure out when we're doing coverage for this, and when I say we, I mean just as a society, is what is hype and what is reality. And I think these AI companies, even when negative things happen, they're still incentivized to paint them in a positive way. So that's kind of the hidden dark side here. When OpenAI says, oops, we hacked someone, it's like, wait, like we hacked someone. Like that's how good our models are, right? Like that's pretty cool. So it makes it really hard to actually analyze the coverage. And in this case specifically, both companies were actually incentivized by the same thing when you think about it from a PR perspective. OpenAI is incentivized to say, wow, like our model is just so good. Look at what it did. And it was just so out of control. It was so good that it wasn't even our fault. And then you have also Hugging Face, who actually made a lot of very simple mistakes that could have prevented this attack, which also a human could have exploited, now that we know more of the details. And Hugging Face is also incentivized to say, oh yeah, dude, this is like some novel, crazy thing, couldn't have been prevented. They tried to spin the entire incident as a success story at Hugging Face because the security team treated OpenAI's report with the urgency it deserved as a genuine 0-day unknown to the world and moved accordingly. Left out of the post is that 5 days passed until OpenAI revealed its role on the breach Hugging Face disclosed, and that at least another 5 days passed from the time OpenAI reported the 0 days and JFrog released patches for them. So the lesson here is that if OpenAI agents can gain a 10-day head start, so too can other models being used maliciously. This is hardly the success story JFrog and OpenAI are trying to make it out to be. Combined with JFrog's opaqueness surrounding the 0 days, because they never actually shared what all the 0 days were, the incident looks even worse. Given the speed at which AI companies are moving, there may still be worse to come. As the title promises, this is the story that keeps on giving. Because right when you think, that's it, this is still unfolding, we're getting more details, we're maybe trying to figure out what this actually looks like, what does it mean? Anthropic now comes forward, who runs Claude, and says, oh, hey, by the way, I also hacked 3 companies during our tests. Oh my gosh. So this one's also a little bit more embarrassing in some ways because 2 of the 3 organizations didn't even know they were already accessed until Anthropic had to tell them. So it's not the like we caught it fast story that we kind of got on the other end of things. And also, Mythos literally uploaded a malicious Python package to a public registry, which compromised 15 machines in the process. So, of course, I always like to look at, well, what's the intent behind, publicizing this? And I guess for me, it's a 50-50 thing. I think this could be the kind of thing where it's like, oh my God, OpenAI is getting a lot of both good and bad press about how their models are so good and they just hack things. And it might Claude not look as good. So Claude's got to say, yeah, we can hack things too. I also think it's equally likely, though, that and this is actually what they reported themselves, this whole incident with OpenAI forced them to start looking at their own logs, and they actually discovered that their models are doing the same thing. I don't know what the truth is, guys. That's why, again, it's very frustrating covering these AI companies because they oftentimes aren't grounded in reality. And this is kind of my thoughts on these AI companies as a whole. They themselves claim that AI is out to end humanity while they're building the AI themselves. And so for me, I think that there's actually a lot of weird incentives for these AI companies to create fear, to create this idea of how powerful these things really are that actually go beyond what they realistically are, which is pattern recognition machines. I'm not saying these aren't powerful machines. We use some of them back here too for some of our content and like fact checking our scripts and helping us with transcripts. So we do use them back here. But I think it's really important to understand that these things are so far, from what I've been able to tell, just doing things that humans can do much faster and much more efficiently, right? One of the stories last week covering this even made the claim, I believe it was from TechCrunch, that this was not at all an AI problem. It was a human problem because the humans didn't even put proper safeguards in place for this tool. I see this as blaming construction equipment for just doing what it's designed to do, but you were bulldozing the wrong building, and it's like, well, maybe the human shouldn't have put that next to the wrong building. So I have a lot of complicated feelings about this. This is still unfolding. I'm not an AI expert or anything. This is just me doing my best to try to make sense of these stories. So let me know what you guys think if you're on Spotify or YouTube, I suppose, or PeerTube, Techlore.tv. Coming soon, we have an activist who is facing a felony for wiping his graphene phone at the border. And then we also have thousands of private Claude chats and artifacts getting indexed by Google. So we will touch on AI again for just a brief second. But before we get there, the US government says that Iran-linked hackers are disrupting American water and energy providers. Now, I like to share this story with people in any story like this because it's very common for us to cover things that are a little bit more hypothetical and more, let's just say, in the cloud and not as, in your hands, something you can feel. And that is kind of the inherent downside of covering security issues, right? When you say something was caught in a data breach, it just feels a bit nebulous to a lot of people. But I love stories like this, obviously not because it's good for people, like this is an awful story, but it reminds people in a very healthy way that these systems do eventually reach the real world, right? There was an advisory updated Wednesday that the FBI and the NSA and the Department of Energy and CISA said that Iranian hackers were targeting programmable logic controllers on internet-connected operational networks, allowing them to manipulate data on their displays, causing outages and disruption, specifically really looking at water and energy providers. Now, originally this was sent to a group which shares cybersecurity information called the Water Information Sharing and Analysis Center. There's something for everything. And they note that the Minnesota Fusion Center, which is a state-level intelligence sharing entity, issued an alert regarding ongoing malicious cyber activity impacting public drinking water systems across Minnesota. This disrupted over 30 communities. It's pretty scary stuff when you think about it. And again, I like these stories because it grounds a lot of the stuff we talk about on this podcast in reality. Now, this clearly has some intense geopolitical ties right now with what's going on in Iran, and that could explain why there could be some targets happening on US soil with things that are cyber attacks. So there's a lot going on here, and I'm not going to get too much into that side of the story. So I like to remind people about what does prepping look like? What would it look like if someone took out your power for a few days? What would it look like if you lost water access for a couple days? Do you have backup water at home? These are the things I like to ask, and it's a good thing for you to think about because you never know what's going to happen. This is going to be an especially challenging one. In the Signal group, I kind of exchanged some messages with some of you guys, which is good because then I got some of your feedback and thoughts, and which helped me kind of form my thoughts on this one. So, the story itself, before I dive into any analysis. So there's an individual here. His name is Samuel Tunick. Tunic, and he runs graphene on his Pixel, and it's something that he uses. He's an activist, part of a group called Defend the Atlanta Forest, which opposed the construction of an enormous law enforcement training facility in the area, often known as Cop City. What he didn't know, according to his lawyers, was that he'd been placed on a watch list for his actions and that Customs and Border Protection had discussed over email plans to detain him upon his arrival back in the US for suspected terrorism activities. And ours here actually kind of downplays what that looks like. So they had a hidden camera that was placed outside the house that he lived in. They also had a tracker placed on his car. They learned that his cell phone records were subpoenaed, and he said he got an email from Google saying his Gmail account had also been subpoenaed. Apparently, he also tried to get a job at a Christmas tree lot, which required a background check. But because it was going to be near public schools, for some reason, he failed the background check. So there's a lot of weird things happening here with very few details. And it makes it difficult to cover the story because we can't know. I know a couple other people have done coverage for the story say that, oh, those things are made up to make him look bad. And other people have said, oh, this guy's clearly up to something no good. That's why he's being investigated. We don't know. That's the reality. And so I wanted to at least share those details. And so that way you guys at least have all the facts of the story. Now, I also want to step back here a little bit because I think there was a piece of news last week that actually fits into this one. And it has to do with a case called U.S. versus Belmont Cardozo. Cardozo, I believe is how you say that. The Fourth Amendment requires that government searches of persons or property be reasonable, which usually means obtaining a warrant based on probable cause from a judge. But a warrantless search can still be reasonable if it falls within an exception to the warrant requirement, including the exception that allows officers to search your belongings at the border. The border search exception allows warrantless searches of persons and property crossing the U.S. border, including the functional equivalent of the border, such as international airports, given the government's interest in controlling who or what may enter the country. And it says right here, until a clear line is drawn, border officers within the Fourth Circuit's jurisdiction can use manual searches to sidestep heightened Fourth Amendment standards that would otherwise apply. And that is kind of the gap that the EFF disagrees with existing. But that whole story I just shared with you is eerily similar to what actually happened to this individual. So this individual was being watched by the FBI for the year, just like I told you, Samuel Tunic, and he traveled outside of the US. And when he was coming home, he had his graphene phone. They started asking him to unlock it, and they used the duress password for graphene, which means they typed in a password which reset the device. And when I say reset, I mean wipe the device. Now, his attorneys accuse the government of demanding access to his phone under the pretext of searching for CSAM, but without providing evidence to justify its suspicion. His motion to suppress argued that the government was instead investigating him over his association with a long-running environmental movement called Defend the Atlanta Forest, which opposes the development of a sprawling training campus for law enforcement in Atlanta, dubbed Cop City. So the prosecutors charged him under a federal statute that makes it unlawful to knowingly destroy or damage property to prevent authorities from seizing it, and he has pleaded not guilty. There is this kind of expectation that when you are going over borders, you have less rights. Now, I do think the duress thing is a very good lesson here because it is something that has been kind of discussed unofficially and kind of just communities online. And I think it really represents how there's a lot of times a gap between kind of speculation online and what the real world looks like. Now, there is a quote here from somebody named Runa Sandvik, who is a security expert who works to protect at-risk people. And she said, "I have not seen this before, though I've discussed this potential scenario with activists and journalists over the years. I think this case serves as a reminder that authorities may argue you knowingly destroyed data, so it's better to not have that data on you when you cross certain borders. With a little planning ahead of time, you can always download the data you need once you get where you're going." And this actually is pretty much what the advice has been that is a little bit more applicable to more of you, and that's kind of the good news here. If you are really concerned about border searches, you shouldn't be carrying a phone with your private data on it, and travel should be treated as its own thing. Get a burner phone, just get something with signal on it and just add a few contacts to it. That way, if you're searched, you just give them your phone, let them scan whatever they want. It's not a huge deal and you move on. But if you're traveling with all of your normal data and you don't want to be, victim to this, I would really recommend just not bringing those devices before I would ever tell someone like, oh yeah, set up a duress password. So just be very careful with that feature. Do your research, make sure it actually fits into your threat model and would actually help you when you try to imagine a very stressed scenario scenario inside of your workflow and your lifestyle. But this is a very interesting story. There's still unfolding, and it should be interesting to see what happens here, because this could set some precedent down the road for something else. All right, everybody, coming soon, we have how thousands of private Claude chats and artifacts got indexed by Google. I wish I could somehow get some of my new tools properly indexed by Google. So maybe I could get some of that magic sauce. But before I get there, I want to share with you a bit about our sponsor today, which is DAWARICH, DAWARICH. Half of today's episode is a story about someone else holding your data when it goes wrong, like a rogue AI agent breaking into companies, hackers quietly sitting inside water systems, a guy facing a felony over what was on his phone at the border. The through line is one that we come back to literally every week on almost every story. The danger wasn't the data itself, it's who's holding it and whether you're the one in control and actually consenting to whatever's happening, which is the whole point of DAWARICH. It's open source, optionally self-hosted location history app. Basically, Google Timeline, except the map actually belongs to you. Import your existing Google data, and you can actually enjoy it and then delete Google when you're done. This is how you can track your cool rides if you're going on rides, or your runs. Really anything. The sky's the limit, and the best part is you don't have to think about the privacy implications because, again, they're open source, and you can even self-host it yourself if you really want to trust only yourself. DAWARICH really flips everything we see in these stories on its head because it gives you a superpower that only you own, and it puts you in the driver's seat. So whether you're an athlete saving your favorite runs, logging office days versus working from home for taxes, documenting that road trip, or you just want a year of your life on a map that nobody else owns that you can share with your friends and family, you can self-host DAWARICH for free or grab the hosted version at DAWARICH.app/Techlore. Again, that's DAWARICH.app/Techlore, where the code Techlore gets you 20% off your first year. All right, everybody, back to the show, and thank you, DAWARICH, for sponsoring us. Before we get into the defense bulletin, we have one just very quick story, also from AI companies, specifically Claude. Now, there's apparently an untold number of Claude chats and artifacts, which is those mini apps and documents that were found publicly searchable on Google over the weekend after a Reddit user discovered that a typing search operator like cite claude.ai/share into Google surfaced a long list of shared conversations. Some reportedly contained health records, private company documents, and the names and phone numbers of children. So let's use this story as a reminder. If you're listening to this, just check through anything that you use that can implement sharing and just double check that what's shared is something that you still want to be shared. It's these more obvious things that sometimes get skipped over. When we look at all the technical stuff, we forget just the most obvious stuff sometimes. Now, Anthropic has come forward and said, yeah, this is kind of the user's fault here. The company said that shared links only appear in search results when they've been posted somewhere search engines can see, like a forum or a social media post. It added that a link sent privately to someone stays out of search, which honestly I think is pretty fair. Like, it's a very fair take. Like, this is a public link. Claude is giving them the ability to go public. Gosh, these autoplaying videos are so obnoxious. So thank you, TechCrunch. Again, I really think that what it seems like happened is it's a user error for the most part. I'm not saying neither of these companies couldn't have done more to introduce safeguards here, but I think a lot of users created this public link, maybe posted it online, forgot about it, and now those are being indexed by Google because they were just found in public places. Now, I use public links all the time, but only for things that I'm like, okay, if this ends up in public hands, that's fine. So just a reminder. And now let's get into the defense bulletin. Now, the defense bulletin is broken up into 3 subsections. The first is the data breaches. The second is the threats of the week, so things to flag. And the third one is the open source updates. So we're going to start here with the data breaches, starting with CareCloud, who's started to notify hundreds of thousands after hackers stole medical records. CareCloud is a US health tech giant, and they said very little about the breach since March. Yes, this literally happened earlier this year when it first admitted that hackers had raided one of its 6 stores of patient data. But new disclosures seen by TechCrunch, though, offer the clearest picture of the breach so far, including that nearly 350,000 people have been impacted. If anyone works for CareCloud, do you just not give a damn? Like, guys, I just want to zoom out. Like, if you know this company or you know someone involved with this company, please check in with them. They disclosed this in March with almost no information. They have had no communication since then. TechCrunch reached out for comment and they didn't respond for comment. And we still have very limited information on anybody who's impacted. And might I remind you, this impacts names, home addresses, social security numbers, government issued identification numbers like passports and driver's licenses. Notices also say that the stolen data included financial information such as bank account information and payment card numbers, alongside a wealth of medical and health related information. I'm pretty pissed about this story just reading it, so I'm going to move on. But check out the show notes if you want to learn more to see what we do know about the story. Now, South Korea has fined a telecom giant KT $39 million for a customer data breach. And I believe we already covered this one, if I'm not mistaken. So the update here is the fine. So make sure to dig into this if you do or have used KT to make sure you already dealt with that. But otherwise, just know that they were fined. Shiny Hunters has claimed a Brinks home breach, threatening to leak stolen data. Brinks is a home security company, which has, it looks like, cameras and some kind of home ecosystem. We were seeing a lot of these nowadays. But they have disclosed that hackers breached some of its systems and are threatening to leak allegedly stolen data. They exfiltrated more than 1 million rows of customer data. They also stole 4,000 rows of things like full names, email addresses, job titles. They stole support chat requests. So this is still unfolding. It's not looking great so far. So if you use Brinks Home Security, check out the story and also make sure you're keeping up with any news, because they're going to start putting things out. Hopefully, if they're not the last company we talked about, the first one I should say, because we talked about if they're not CareCloud, they might actually communicate and actually care a little bit about their users. Obviously, these are always ironic because this is a home security company and now they could jeopardize your home safety a little bit, right? So I always like to point people as often as they can towards things that are as close to zero knowledge as possible. Guys, when it's something this sensitive, like I actually had a family member recently who just didn't think about it, right? Like they had a home security camera that was an indoor security camera, and they started getting weird messages from the local company about like things that were happening around the house. And it just didn't click that, yeah, it's not zero knowledge. It's not end-to-end encrypted. So any employee can go and watch that camera. And so this is something people forget. We hear companies like Google, we hear companies like OpenAI. We think of them as companies, but they're made up by thousands of employees. And those employees can have a lot of access to your data depending on how the company is doing things. And that's why it's always important to chase after as close to zero knowledge as possible, because why would you want to trust random people behind companies with your information? Or why would you trust a data breach doesn't lead to something really sensitive coming up? It's a good talking point, I think, that I've had a lot of luck with. There's a semiconductor company named Analog Devices that disclosed a data breach. They say their operations were unaffected, but if you want to learn more, check out the show notes. We also have a small update to Fairlife, which I had no idea was a Coca-Cola company. And they just have a small update here that they confirmed that data was stolen as part of that attack. So you can learn more about that if you want to learn more in the show notes. Australian energy provider Origin says a data breach exposed client data. And so this impacted things like full names, physical addresses, date of births, and it's impacted quite a lot of people, 4.8 million. And so if you have any sort of relationship with Origin, make sure to look into that story. OnTrack has also started notifying customers of a data breach after a network hack. This is a parcel delivery company. And so if you were impacted by this, ideally you got a quick notice about that. Chick-fil-A also has come out with a few more details. I believe we covered this last week. So if any of you like eating chickens, they have a data breach that impacted more than 13,000 customers. So it was a bit of a smaller scale breach here, and they got it from a third-party source apparently. And so if you do want to see if you were impacted, check out the show notes down in a description. All right, now we're going to get into the threats, and we're running a little bit short on time here, so I'll do my best. But Patrick Breyer, who's been kind of the main politician who is helping lead this whole movement against chat control, he just put out a quick blog. I'm not going to talk too much about it because it's quite similar to other things he's shared, and we even talked about it, I think, last week or the week before. But it's just a quick blog post that is very well written about how the true losers of Chat Control 1.0 coming back are children, and why he feels that way about it, and kind of the stats behind Chat Control and why they overwhelmingly actually can sometimes harm children as well. And so if you want to read a little bit more about it, definitely check out the show notes. This next one is a quick update. I'm still wrapping my head around it and how I feel about this one, but Google has a privacy-preserving age verification system that's coming to the Play Store, and this relies on an API that ties to parents. This doesn't require an ID. It doesn't require selfie verification. It's just connected to the Family Link app. The idea is that parents will set age ranges for their kids' managed accounts. Of what I've seen, this is a slightly better system, right? But Again, the real root concern here, guys, I have no doubt that we can solve the technology problem of doing this in a privacy respecting way. I think that's possible. I've seen the zero knowledge proofs. It still hasn't really been done on a mass scale, so I think it's not even there yet, but let's just assume we figure that out. I still have an issue with the idea of changing what the internet looks like depending on who you are. I think that's really at the core now of what I'm truly concerned about, because if we're starting to, decide, oh, for these people the internet looks like this, for these people the internet looks like this, and in this region the internet is allowed to have this, in this region it's not, we're going to start seeing a lot less of a free open internet. It's like if we have these different libraries spread around the city, and one library doesn't allow people under this age to get in, and this one doesn't allow people above this age to get in, and all of them have different pieces of content, we're going to start seeing curated content for specific groups of people, and they might not get the full picture, right? So those are my concerns. It's a concern of censorship. It's a concern of freedom of expression, freedom of information, all those things. And I think that's really my long-term concern looking at these stories. JetBrains has warned of a critical TeamCity remote code execution flaw. And so if you want to learn about this, again, it affects TeamCity. And if you use that, you should look into it to make sure that you're not impacted and what you can do to prevent it. This one's just interesting. And so if you're more technical, you might like this. But Mythos, Claude's, crazy, offensive cybersecurity model actually found an issue with an algorithm candidate for post-quantum encryption. But it killed the algorithm called Hawk. Like the quote here is basically, with this paper, Hawk is dead. And so pretty interesting stuff. It's good that it was found. And so I do think genuinely that these AI models do have really good potential to do really positive things. And so I'm trying to be optimistic about them, but I know that also comes with a lot of the negatives with them as well. So I know that this kind of contradicts the earlier stories from earlier. So I'm just doing my best to stay optimistic, guys. The next story comes from MISC, who are some security researchers, especially in the Apple ecosystem side of things. And they found a way to replace trusted macOS app executables. And they actually demoed this with Signal. Let's say you download Signal onto your machine or anything. Again, this isn't a knock on Signal. This can impact any executable with this kind of flaw. And so if you run a malicious app or script on your Mac, and it'll replace them with malicious versions. This doesn't require your Mac's password nor any special approval, and it can happen entirely in the background. Accessing protected data still requires your approval, but the macOS system prompts show the trusted app's name and icon, making the request appear to come from the real app. It's a lot more interesting than that if you want to get into the technical details. Again, it's a very well-written blog that I do recommend checking out, especially if you're more technical. But Apple has concluded that the behavior does not constitute a security issue for the following reasons. One, the proof of concept replaces the entire application bundle rather than modifying an existing signed executable. The attack requires code execution as the current user and only affects applications opened by that user. The replacement executable does not inherit the original application's entitlements, and Apple considers convincing a user to approve these prompts to be a matter of social engineering rather than a bypass of their security mechanisms and gatekeepers designed to evaluate downloaded applications before their first launch. So there's kind of an ongoing debate of whether or not this is something that Apple should patch or not. Okay, everybody, and now we're going to get into the open source updates, starting with Proton Pass. And this one is quite interesting. It's an autofill improvement here. So it can autofill on sites where it previously couldn't, including shopping platforms, social media sites, forums, and banking websites. And they improved the way that they detect forms on the websites you're visiting. What I really want to know is if it's going to work with Apple. If you guys know, there's like a very notorious thing where logging into an iCloud account only works with autofill in Safari. So let me see if I can actually test it myself right now. Oh my gosh, dude. Guys, no way. I am literally on Apple's site. I'm obviously not going to show you because I don't want to reveal my credentials. It's in a different browser window. But autofill now works on iCloud.com. So for any of you Apple users out there who have kind of caught that Apple doesn't really agree with much autofill, Proton Pass, I just confirmed, now works with iCloud. They also have a liquid glass animations and some other updates there that I think are not the highlight changes, but pretty good stuff overall. Tails 7.1 got a new shutdown procedure. Tails is the anonymous operating system that is ephemeral. And it's a bit slower, but it prevents data loss. So the power off confirmation dialog informs you an application needs to be closed or an open document needs to be saved. Even if you don't confirm, Tails will still shut down after 60 seconds, which is what my first thought was. Is Tails is theoretically used in emergency situations. So how does that play along? They replaced GNOME videos with Celluloid, which is a more modern and reliable video player. And it looks like they have some other just minor updates that go along with that. Thunderbird hit version 153, which they're titling Meadow, and it launches with a smoother setup, Thundermail integration, and more. Seems like they have some nice appearance updates. They now work with native support from Microsoft Exchange email servers. And there's quite a few other changes. So if you use Thundermail or Thunderbird, I would definitely check this one out. This is a quick signal boost that there's a new Firefox Nova UI with the return of compact mode. I actually made a whole video on the main Techlore channel. So if you're on YouTube, I'll leave a card for it. Or if you're on the podcast, I'll leave it in the show notes. But I did a whole first look at this new Nova UI in the nightly version, and I kind of walk through what it looks like, what the differences are, and compare it to regular Firefox. And I do want to remind people that most likely this is going to eventually be a downstream thing, right? Like Mullvad browser will eventually inherit some of this, Tor browser, etc. And so this is kind of the new direction for Firefox. So I kind of detail what I like and don't like about it. So I would check out that video if you want to learn more about this. Collabora Online, which is an online collaboration document thing, think like Microsoft Office, but in the cloud and open source, adds optional AI assistant and smarter document comparison and review. And so if you use Collabora, definitely go check that out. Now we also have Wine that hit a version 11.14. You can find a changelog down in the show notes. And that, everybody, is going to wrap up this week of surveillance report. A lot of interesting stories, a lot of AI stuff. We had other interesting things outside of the AI stuff. So thank you all for tagging along on this journey. If this analysis helped you reclaim control, you can become a Techlorian by visiting a link in the show notes. You'll gain access to our private Signal group. You'll get some other perks in our community. And regardless, if you want a newsletter version of this, like you just want something quick in your email inbox that's maybe quicker to forward to your friends and family, or honestly, it's just really good for your friends and family if you know they're not going to listen to a whole podcast. I do like a TLDR 5-minute read of this podcast on our website every single week. That's a newsletter, and it's free to access. It's not spammy or anything. So if you want that, I would really recommend checking that out and signing up down in the description. If you haven't already too, make sure to leave a rating. I know Spotify, if you're listening on Spotify, just click however many stars you like this podcast. And if you're on Apple, same thing, just leave a rating. It really helps a lot. It helps for discovery, and it helps me reach more and more people with this news. And I want to thank you all for listening, being here this week, taking your privacy and security and your digital freedom seriously for one other week. And I'll see you in the next episode of Surveillance Report. You're all awesome. And I can't wait to be back next week. See you soon.